Hey everybody, John Cassani here, Calusa Waterkeeper. Out here on the Caloosahatchee Estuary today. We're about a mile upstream of I-75, and you can probably see the Florida Power and Light Plant in the background. We thought we'd talk about manatees a little bit today. As most of you probably are aware, the manatees seek the warm water effluent from the FP&L power plant behind us. So this time of the year when the water temperature is low, the manatees are attracted to this area. They also seek fresh water. They're also seeking vegetation, food this time of the year. So they're a long ways from being out in the Gulf or the nearshore areas. So they're dependent on the limited resources that are here. I think everybody perhaps knows that the Caloosahatchee River in Lee County was considered federally designated critical habitat for manatees. I believe it was in 1976. And we've seen a lot of change since then, and some of the resources that the manatees depend on, some water quality, some seagrass issues have declined or deteriorated, so it creates more stress on these manatee populations. So there was a petition in 2008 to review the status of the Manatee Critical Habitat designation. And the Fish and Wildlife Service did agree, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did agree to review the designated critical habitat, but unfortunately 2 years later they determined they didn't have the resources to do the actual review. So we're still kind of in a limbo on the federally designated critical habitat. And so that critical habitat ends at State Road 31 upstream here. Some of the changes we've seen since manatees were listed as an endangered species in 1967 is that most of the upper estuary seagrass is pretty much diminished and gone as a result of some management plans to release water. Typically, we have problems in the dry season where we're not getting enough freshwater inflow, and it kills off the freshwater grasses, mostly tape grass, Valsenaria in the upper estuary. So if a manatee wants that kind of food, they're going to have to move all the way downstream, maybe as much as 25 miles downstream to get access to marine grasses they can feed on. So they're really in kind of a jeopardy situation here. And that's why several wildlife conservation groups had petitioned the Fish and Wildlife Service to review this critical habitat so that maybe some of the policy outcomes that affect the seagrass and the salinity and the water quality might take into account the jeopardy that these manatees are in. Back when manatees were listed as an endangered species, the population was only a little over 1,000. The good thing is we've seen the population increase considerably, and manatees were delisted from endangered status in 2017 to threatened. None of the protections went away, but there was that designation difference in the status of its jeopardy situation. So it's still kind of a stressful situation for manatees here in the river. They're attracted to the warm water effluent that comes from this power plant flows out into the Orange River, into this Caloosahatchee estuary here, and the manatees congregate here. And so there's often a lot of boat traffic. Sometimes the boats don't comply with the idle speed in some areas. We're currently in an idle speed zone, so we're not seeing much boat traffic out today, which is probably a good thing for the manatees because there's a lot of them here right now. The other negative thing that you should know about is manatee mortality is increasing. 2018 was a big mortality year. I think the third highest mortality year. 2019 was pretty high, and 2020 was relatively high as well. Unfortunately, during 2018, there was so much manatee mortality, they couldn't gather up all the carcasses and document the extent of the mortality. They also were not able to do as many necropsies, so we didn't clearly understand what the sources of the mortality were in 2018. 2020, we had COVID, and Many of the carcasses were not necropsied because of the situation that presented the risk to staff doing necropsies at that time in 2020. So there's a lot of uncertainty about the status of the population, I think, right now in terms of mortality, where the trends are, and what's actually happening to the habitat is one of the key factors that will enable the manatees to fully recover. So that's a little bit of a primer on manatees. Just so many things going on with water quality now that lead to algae blooms, and that creates some mortality. Some of the red tide mortality on manatees has been the highest it's been. 2013 was a bad year, 2005 was a bad year, and of course 2018. So you add these consecutive years where there's lots of stressors that results in mortality, it begins to play on the overall population. So a little bit on manatees today. I hope if you're out on the water, you'll be careful, observe the speed zones. If you see a manatee in distress or a dead manatee, you can report that to the FWC Wildlife Alert number that you'll see here. So enjoy the water when you're out. Appreciate the really great resources that we have here, and that we have animals like manatees that we can see and observe in the wild. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you out there soon. Thanks.